This is an Iowa Fraud Fighter presentation, and it is presented by the Iowa Insurance Division. We usually do these in person, but as you know, those times are gone for now. We do them individually as requested, and we also do them in larger venues where we provide a free lunch for anyone who attends, and do have the Iowa Attorney General's office there as well to help us present. So this is the virtual format. And as Erin stated, there is a workbook that goes along with this. I'll kind of put it up here in front of my camera. This is what it looks like. There are physical copies that are available, and there are also virtual copies that are available on the website, and it's iowafraudfighters.gov is the website. Again, that's iowafraudfighters.gov is where you can find a copy of this workbook. And I am going to refer to it now and then. So if you don't have a copy right there available, to quickly get on the website and look at it, just maybe make notes as to the page numbers. And so then once you get on the website and look at it, you'll be able to see what I was referring to. But as Erin stated, I am Sonya Sellmeyer. I'm the consumer advocate here at the Iowa Insurance Division. We are the state agency that regulates insurance agents and securities brokers. So your local State Farm agent, your local Edward Jones agent, we regulate those agents along with those companies. So we regulate any insurance and investment transactions in the state of Iowa. We also do these fraud fighter presentations, like I said, and I'm going to share my screen now. And because part of our, what we do, not only do we regulate these companies, so not only do we regulate those companies, but we feel part of our duty to Iowa consumers is to educate and to protect consumers from fraud. There is some fraud related to the insurance and investment industry, and that's why we're involved in this. There's also fraud related to consumer protection matters, and those are things that are handled by the Iowa Attorney General's office. And we're going to discuss both sides of those things in more detail here. A little bit more about myself. I worked at the insurance division. I started here in, I think it was 1999. And I investigated the frauds that we're going to talk about today. And I did that for approximately 9 years. Almost all of my victims were older Iowans. And it was very hard to work those cases. And so a lot that we talk about here today, I have experienced with victims here in the state of Iowa. I did leave the insurance division for about 11 years to investigate sex offenders, and then decided to come back to the insurance division. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk to Iowans about fraud and how to protect themselves from becoming the victims of a fraud. Not only from insurance and investment related scams, but also consumer protection type scams as well. So as I stated, there is the workbook that I will be referencing. Feel free, if you're able to hop on the iowafraudfighter.gov website and look at that as I'm talking. If not, always feel free to go back and look there. That iowafraudfighters.gov website also has current information about current scams that we're seeing. There's some blog entries there from myself and from Al Perales from the Iowa Attorney General's office. So definitely check those out. So what we're going to start with today is just a welcome video from our office.
Hi, I'm Chance McElhaney, the Iowa Insurance Division's Communications Director. I'm here to welcome you to this Iowa Fraud Fighters event. Con artists swindle older Americans out of $3 billion each year. We're here to help give you tips and guidance to help shield you from these types of scammers and deputize you as an Iowa fraud fighter today. As an Iowa fraud fighter, you'll learn tricks to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters and how to learn to double check before you invest. We want to make sure that you have the information to be able to report these scams as they happen to either the Iowa Insurance Division or any of our other state agencies.
So, unfortunately, fraud happens in the state of Iowa. I think we like to assume that maybe that stuff doesn't happen here, but it does. And as I stated, when I worked at the insurance division before, I worked on those cases. And in fact, con artists swindle more than 5 million Americans over the age of 60 each year for almost $3 billion. And I think that number is greatly underreported. A lot of people are embarrassed to report that they've been scammed. So I can't imagine what the true number really is. And I think this year it's been bad as well with COVID. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But many times you hear people say that fraud doesn't happen in small town Iowa, but it does. And a lot of times it drains an entire lifetime of savings. So we are going to hear next from a consumer that was actually scammed. She's a retired school teacher here in the state of Iowa, and she has very bravely offered to go in front of the camera for us and talk about her story so that we can all learn from her.
It was 2 postcards that came in the mail, and one of them has had to do with investment, and the other one was information about Social Security. And I laid them aside, intending to order the one about Social Security. When I signed them, I signed the wrong one and shredded the one that I should have kept, and that brought somebody to my door at a later time. So I figured out what had happened, and I finally reluctantly did let him in. He said he would only take 15 minutes, and it lasted much longer than that, of course. They offered a really high interest rate, and about that time we sold some property, and they knew about that. And I think that's what kept them coming back and keeping in touch with me, because they knew that I was going to have some income and would have something to invest. I handed over a check for my half of the sale of farm property that was over $1 million. And I handed over, he talked me out of the annuity that I had been adding to from my paycheck from teaching for 40 some years. And he told me that we needed to get it out of the annuity, that if I didn't get it out of there, I would lose it. I always thought that people had to be pretty stupid to let it take place, but I sure got fooled, and I was well aware that things like that went on. But I think you have to watch out, because they have all kinds of charming things to say and get you off your guard. I still think about it frequently when I get in bed before I go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning, and if I'm lying there getting awake, I start thinking about it again, and I just about have to block it out of my mind, because I can ruin my whole day thinking about what could have been. I'll never be in the place I was before it happened. Things are better than they were, but it'll never be the same. I don't trust people as much as I used to. I know that I won't let anybody in my front door that I don't know, whether they're wanting my money or something else. And I certainly would have a better idea of who to check with, and not try to figure it out for myself when I don't. It's something I'm knowledgeable about. You just have to be very careful. You can ruin the rest of your life if you aren't.
So Martha Joe was the victim of three different types of fraud: affinity fraud, promissory note, and a Ponzi scheme. Affinity fraud is when you prey on someone who's in like a like community. For instance, if you have someone who scams a bunch of people that are in the same book club, or go to the same church, that's all affinity fraud. Promissory note, the bad guy in Martha Joe's story wrote her out a promissory note saying, I will pay you X amount of dollars at X amount of interest. And that was the promissory note fraud. It was just a piece of paper. It didn't mean anything. And we see a lot of that actually in Iowa. And then a Ponzi scheme, if you don't know what that is, it's named after Charles Ponzi. He perpetrated a scam around the time of the Great Depression, where he took in money from people and then used that money to pay off old investors at a great rate of return. So then people talked, oh, hey, if you go invest your money with Charles, he'll give you this great rate of return. And it brought more people in. Well, eventually the people stop coming in, the money dries up. The old investors aren't getting it paid, and then that's when everything collapses. I think his investment was around postage stamps, is what his investment was around. But a Ponzi scheme is basically you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, is what it is. And a lot of the scams that we see here in Iowa are the same way. They're stealing money from one person to pay back the money that they stole from somebody else. And that could be in the realm of them acting as an insurance agent or an investment broker, and maybe they sold you a fraudulent product or something. But that's how that works. Martha Joe was smart. She was a teacher. Even her banker fell for the scheme. She did everything right, except for calling our office, the Iowa Insurance Division, to see if the person that she was buying the investment from was actually licensed with our office. That person was licensed, but we had some other complaints. So she would have called our office. We would have, our complaints are confidential, but we would have maybe talked to her about what are the pros and cons here, and does this sound too good to be true? And with her investment, it was too good to be true, and that should have been the first red flag. He was convicted and sent to prison. But calling our office and checking to see if whoever you're doing insurance or investment in business is licensed and has a clean record is always the first step. And that's that double check that you saw at the end there of that video. We call it double check to make sure that they're licensed and in good standing. And there's more information about these types of scams on page 1 of the notebook. So jot that down so you can look at that later. And now we're going to watch a video of our insurance commissioner, Doug Oman, and he's going to talk about these scams. And some of the scams that he does not talk about in the video, we will talk about afterward.
We see varied investment in insurance schemes, but some of the more common ones would include promissory note schemes, Ponzi schemes, and we still see a fair number of free dinner scams. Promissory notes to be sold here in Iowa require registration and securities. They're covered under our investment laws. So oftentimes what consumers will be promised is above normal, certainly above market investment returns in the form of interest rate returns. And those are really problematic because if there's not an actual business behind those promissory notes, there's really no way that the individual is going to be able to pay the kind of interest that they've made or in terms of a promise. Promissory notes are often used in Ponzi schemes. And a Ponzi scheme is a promissory note or an investment which has an illusion of a legitimate business. That is, there's some profit being earned behind that promissory note. When actually all that is happening is the promoter is robbing Peter to pay Paul. They'll go out to continue to solicit new investors and essentially build a very, very large pyramid, which ultimately will fail because there's no real legitimate business behind it that's generating returns for investors. The schemes that we see oftentimes are really targeted toward the elderly. And there are all types of tricks that are used to encourage people to come to a free dinner seminar. Sometimes those seminars, frankly, are legitimate. That is, it's just a way to generate new business. But unfortunately, that same sort of promotion is used to bring people in and sell them all sorts of things that they just simply don't need. Some of it really can relate to investments. Sometimes it can relate to other types of scams that the Attorney General's office would prosecute. Scam artists will use current events as a way to promote new schemes. They know that investors read the paper, that they track current events. But oil and gas scams continue to come back, not every year, but we do see and have recently seen some cases brought by our office involving that type of trick. Normally, it's the promise that there's some well off in some remote state and you buy an interest in it. You're buying an interest in the promise that the expert on site is going to do the development and earn some pretty significant returns for investors. Again, most of those investments are unregistered. Investors should double check before they invest. And again, even with an oil and gas scam, there's a lot of work that we can do on behalf of consumers or investors to help them. Gold and precious metals are really driven mostly based upon world economic circumstances. And it can be related to events such as hurricanes or earthquakes, but by and large, it has a lot more to do with just consumers' perception of what's happening around the world economically. Certainly during times of uncertainty, gold investments may actually make sense for some investors, but people should be very wary about the telemarketer who dials them up and tries to sell them something like a gold and precious metals investment. Again, that's one of those areas where investors should double check before they invest. Even precious metal investments are regulated, and they can contact our office and we might be able to help them before they make a really serious mistake. Seniors who have been scammed are described by the scam artist as a mark. And whether that's something that is happening, in a door-to-door sale or it's happening through telemarketing, those individuals are marked, and those names are then sold to other scam artists. In fact, I've even been involved in investigations where the scam artist will sell one type of investment. The individuals will be identified as marks because they've been scammed, and then literally without changing phones, the scam artist will make another call back and be a whole new investment and go back and reload on those investors. Unfortunately, again, individuals that have been scammed or conned, they become a pretty regular target for con artists. The Iowa Insurance Division is here to help you fight insurance and investment fraud.
So there's some things that Commissioner Oman talked about in that video that I really want to stress. He talks about scam artists reloading their scams around current events, and that is very much the case right now. When the pandemic began, we were hearing lots of consumers saying they were getting calls about investments in PPE companies or investments in vaccination trials, things like that. I think it's only going to get worse, actually, now that the vaccinations appear to be up and running. They follow the headlines. They also, there were a lot of scam calls about to small businesses that had received the small business loans from the CARES Act, and scammers trying to get that money away from them. So remember that the scammers always follow the current events. This slide right here, the scams that are listed that have an asterisk next to them, Commissioner Oman talked about in the video. The other thing I want to mention that he did talk about was the free dinner seminars. We've all probably gotten a card in the mail about come to this local restaurant, enjoy this nice meal, and hear this pitch from this insurance or investment agent. And those are probably legit, but as I like to say is we don't get something for nothing. You show up at those to get your free meal and you're giving away your personal information. And they're going to try to sell you something, whether it's, it might be appropriate for you or it might not. So just be aware of that those free dinner seminars come with some strings attached. A couple other quick scams I want to talk about real briefly are private placement offerings. And these are investments in small companies, and the small company might not even exist. So be careful with anything like that, and make sure you call our office to ask questions. Maybe guide you through what questions you do need to ask if someone is trying to get you to invest in a small business. Chances are it's legit, but if they've reached out to you and you don't know them, chances are it's not. Self-directed IRAs are also on the list. They can be legitimate, but maybe not appropriate for everyone. So if someone approaches you about that, make sure you reach out to our office or someone else for some guidance on that. And then I haven't seen a lot of this lately, but maybe 5 years ago or so, these were very popular. They're called prime bank investments or high yield investment products. And the red flag there is they tell you that this is an investment with no risk or very little risk, and it has connections to the European market or an Asian financial market, things like that. Those are big red flags, and you don't, usually they're scams as well. When I worked at the Attorney General's office, I was actually involved in investigating one of those, and it was just crazy the scam that they had spun to these Iowa consumers about investing offshore. So that's a big red flag, anything offshore. And the one thing I want you to remember about investment scams more than anything, I mean, if you can't tell me at the end of this what a Ponzi scheme is or a promissory note, that's fine. Because what I want you to remember is if it's too good to be true, it is. I can't stress that enough. Every fraud case that I have ever worked with investments or insurance, it was too good to be true. The minute the consumer told me the returns that they were supposed to be getting, I knew they were scammed without even looking into it any further because it just wasn't realistic. I looked up the average rate of a certificate of deposit right now is less than 0.5%. And over the last century, the average rate of return for the stock market is 10%. So if someone's telling you that they're going to give you a return on your investment that's 20%, it's too good to be true. Bernie Madoff, all of his was a Ponzi scheme that he ran. And when he went out to pitch this to people to invest, it was too good to be true. The amount of returns were just too good to be true. So that's what you need to remember from this portion of the presentation today. So now we're going to move on to common consumer scams, and these are regulated by the Iowa Attorney General's office. And we are going to watch a video from their consumer protection director about these scams.
The most common scams we're seeing in Iowa today, I think probably number one is the IRS scam, and that's where individuals call and pretend to be part of the Internal Revenue Service and say they need you to wire them money right away or you're going to go to jail. Of course, the IRS would never call you like that. You should ignore those calls. If you're at all worried, please hang up, do your own research, and look into that. Tech scams are also very common right now, where people they pretend to be from Microsoft or Google even these days and will call up and say, hey, your computer's infected and we need to help you out. Again, those companies would never do that. We see a lot of lottery scams. Of course, the only legitimate lottery in Iowa is the Iowa Lottery Powerball. Never play another lottery. We see a lot of counterfeit check scams where people will send you a check, say, hey, I'm from Nigeria, I need this check cashed and money wired back to me. And since you're doing work for me, you can keep a couple $100 on top and then wire me the rest of the money back. And of course, the check closes because it is a fake check. I think those are some of our most common scams.
And these scams are on page 3 and 4 of the workbook that you can find online. I'm going to touch on a couple more that I think have become more prevalent in the last year or two since that video was made. The grandparent scam, that's when you answer the phone and someone says, Grandpa, is that you? And you say, yeah, Billy, is that you? And they say, well, I'm in jail in Mexico. Don't tell mom and dad, but I need you to wire me X amount of dollars to get me out of jail. That's the grandparent scam. Sweetheart scams, I have really seen a lot of uptick in this lately. Actually dealt with an Iowa consumer this summer who had been scammed. This is when you meet someone online or not. She'd actually met this person in person physically in Eastern Iowa. And then eventually they get into some kind of jam where they need money. usually to get out of jail or something like that, or they have a medical condition. A lot of times they say they're in the military and they're overseas, and then this is just an online only relationship. But just be cautious of the sweetheart scams. I'm going to talk about home repair scams for a minute, especially since you're in Eastern Iowa. We've gotten a lot of complaints in our office about derecho damage. And I would not be surprised if the home repair scammers are hitting the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area with scams. So you need to make sure that you're aware of those scammers. Usually go door to door offering to fix things, but they want to be paid up front. So you need to be cautious of that. You don't ever want to do that. Maybe make an arrangement so that you pay a certain portion up front, but not the whole thing. And you don't want to have them pressure you into signing a contract that says that they're demanding this payment in advance, and that they will negotiate the cost of the insurance settlement for you. And actually, once you pay them, they're gone and the work's not done and they're not negotiating with your insurance company or anything. Identity theft is always a problem. Make sure you keep an eye on all of your financial statements, check your bank accounts, check your credit. As of July 1 of 2018, you can now freeze your credit in the state of Iowa, so that no one can go and open a credit card or something like that in your name. You can easily unfreeze it if you need to go get a car loan or a mortgage or something like that. There's more information about that on the Attorney General's website. And there's also a handout on the Iowa Fraud Fighters website about that for more information. And then catfishing scams. That goes back to the sweetheart scams where they might scam you out of money, or they might even just scam you out of your identity as well. One other thing I want to point out with regards to consumer scams, and we can talk more about this a little bit later, because I think we're all a little bit more familiar with these consumer scams, more so than we are insurance and investment scams. One thing we get a lot of calls about, and the Attorney General's office does, is someone gets a call and they're asked to go buy gift cards, and then they mail the gift cards somewhere. You're never to be paying for something with gift cards. Gift cards are for you to buy, to give to your grandkids, your nieces and nephews, things like that. They are not for you to go out and buy to send to someone you do not know that contacted you over the phone. And the best line of defense on that is, and I can't stress this enough, this is another one of those things that I want you to remember when we're done here today, is don't answer your phone unless you know who is calling you. It is very important. That's how the scammers are reaching us most likely today, especially since they can't come knock on your door. And they do come knock on your door. But in these times, I would hope you wouldn't let a complete stranger in your house during a pandemic. But you definitely don't want to answer your phone if you get a call from an unknown number. I know since Friday, I've been getting all of these calls from Jamaica. I think I've had, almost 100 of these calls since Friday. I found a way on my phone to send all unknown calls to silent. So I'm not even seeing them until I go check. But definitely do not answer your phone unless you know who is calling you. And even then, be a little suspect, because they can spoof a loved one's phone number. So we're going to go through some tips to prevent fraud. And that's my number one tip. Don't answer your phone if you don't know who's calling you. Don't be a courtesy victim. You do not have to be Iowa nice to someone you do not know. Hopefully you haven't answered your phone, but if you did and they try to convince you into something, say no and hang up. Check out anyone you don't recognize who is trying to get you to invest or give them money. Call our office at the Iowa Insurance Division or the Iowa Attorney General's office. We do work closely with the Iowa Attorney General's office, so don't hesitate to call one or the other, and we'll get you over to the right one. And double check before you invest. When you call our office, if you decide you want to go to the local Edward Jones agent, call us and make sure he is licensed and that he doesn't have anything on his record that might concern you. You can also check out licensing for investment personnel on brokercheck.org. If you Google broker check, that will bring that website up. And it's really important that you make sure you know that your investment person is properly licensed. and that they don't have, like something criminal on their history or bankruptcy, if that concerns you. And don't let anyone prey on your emotions or fears. If someone is trying to get you to do something based on fear, like this is the only today can you get this investment, or if they're preying on your emotions about their medical condition. I need money for my medical condition, like they use in sweetheart scams or anything. Get out of it. Hang up the phone. Stop communicating with that person. Call somebody about it. But just do not let them prey on your emotions or fears, because that is a red flag. A lot of people that I have dealt with who have been victims of fraud, unfortunately, the scammers brought in their religion and preyed on them based on their religion. So beware of that as well. Again, don't be wary of any unsolicited offers. That's anyone calling you, sending you something in the mail. Martha Joe got something in the mail, and that's how she got scammed. She sent in the wrong postcard. Watch for reload scams. That's what Commissioner Oman was talking about your name. You get a mark. They know who to scam. And I've heard this from victims. Unfortunately, once you've been a victim, chances are that your chances are greater that you're going to be a victim a second time. Stop, think, and call. Call somebody else, whether it's me, our office, the Attorney General's office, a trusted family member or friend. Just stop and call somebody else and run it by them. I know Al from the Attorney General's office, who usually does these presentations in person with us, he was telling us a story one time where a lady came into the office to file a complaint, and as she was telling them the story, she stopped and showed them. She said, this all seemed legit at the time, but now that I'm telling it to you out loud, this is crazy. This is a scam. She just needed to say it out loud to somebody. And don't be embarrassed to report fraud. You're going to prevent someone else from becoming a victim. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Senior Health Insurance Information Program. This is part of the Iowa Insurance Division, and they help seniors with their Medicare. It's a free service to anyone, and it'll help you pick out the correct Medicare program for you. And they also help fight Medicare fraud, which is a huge drain on our monetary system each year. So we're going to watch a short video on that.
The main way that we help people prevent fraud for themselves or abuse is to educate them. Educate them to understand what Medicare is, what their options are, what protections are there for them, and how to avoid people taking advantage of them. We do that through education. We do it through one-to-one counseling with folks. We do it through media, consumer guides. But our real goal is to make sure that they know and they understand so they can make informed decisions. SHIP is so important because we're a resource for people who don't understand. And Medicare is very complicated. And there's so much you can misunderstand and then make a decision that maybe isn't the best for you. And so when people are concerned about whether they understand something or whether it's fraudulent, they really should give us a call. It's free, it's confidential, it's objective. We don't sell or promote anything. We just want to make sure that people have the right information so that they can make good decisions and have the health coverage they need so that they can stay as healthy as possible and get the services they need.
So like I said, our office deals with Medicare scams as well, and that includes false billing. Make sure you're reviewing your billing. Medicare number theft. Don't give out your Medicare number to anyone. Try not to carry your card with you unless you have to. Try to keep it somewhere safe. Beware of enrollment scams. I think there's a lot of that going on. I just spoke to a gentleman this morning who's been getting inundated with phone calls. Open enrollment just ended, so hopefully those will stop, but just be aware of that. And Medicare mail fraud, them sending you things in the mail that aren't really from Medicare. They're just scammers trying to get the information from you or to get you to buy things that you don't need through your Medicare. Know the official enrollment dates for Medicare. Protect your card. Don't share your personal information with someone unless you initiate that call with our office or your health insurance provider on your Medicare. Review your statements to make sure there's nothing fraudulent on there, and confirm suspicious mailings with our SHIP office. We're running low on time, so I'm going to start kind of going through this a little quicker. This is a short video from the Iowa Department of Aging about caregiver abuse and directives, as in power of attorneys and wills and things. So we'll watch this.
So some examples of elder abuse or dependent adult abuse or financial exploitation. First off is caregiver or abuse by a person who cares for a dependent adult. You could see that in physical manifestations. So not taking care of a person who has physical needs, needs to walk around, needs to receive certain adaptive technology and isn't receiving that. You can see that in that sense. You can also see it in the financial sense of a caregiver, to where they may not have legal access to a bank account or to other type of assets, and they use those for their own benefit. Basically, the person has a fiduciary duty, and that's, again, legal jargon, but it's a reason to act in the best interest of the person, right? And instead of doing that, they act in their own best interest. And then you have more of the criminal con artist fads, where you see the sweetheart scheme, where somebody tries to contact an individual online or through phone, and they ingratiate themselves with the individual, they gain their trust and confidence, and then they raid the bank account or they raid the property. You also have the grandchild scheme, which is done really popular on Facebook. So people that put information on Facebook, where their family may be, where their family may live, and all of a sudden somebody calls or sends an email and says, I am indisposed or in jail in Mexico because I'm on vacation in Cancun. I need you to wire me $500. All of a sudden, $500 is wired, and the grandchild is safe and sound at home, right? So you have con artist schemes like that. You also have areas called power of attorney abuse between the principal and the person. And the person who's to act as the power of attorney sometimes can use that document to do a lot of damage in areas that you wouldn't expect. Opening bank accounts in a person's name, securing credit cards or line of credit in that person's name. They do a lot of things that are not meant to be used for a power of attorney. We hear a lot about the criminal aspect of, con artists and people that we don't know. A lot of time, financial exploitation is people that we do know. Sons, daughters, nephews, people that are close to us, people that we invest trust and have a history with. And we don't want to believe that they would take advantage of us or our goodwill. And those are the cases where you can really have a lot of damage and really have a high dollar amount because, number one, not a lot of people are going to expect that person's going to do that. And secondly, nobody really wants to report that. Nobody wants to go to the police and say, my son or daughter or my grandchild or my nephew or niece is stealing from me.
So on pages 8 and 9 of the workbook, there's more information about advanced directives, power of attorneys, and living wills, just those documents in general. And then on page 9, there's signs to watch out for that caregiver abuse, because as the former director of the Iowa Department of Aging Office of Public Guardian stated, most of the abuse is done by caregivers, whether it be physical or financial. A lot of it is done by caregivers. So I'm going to, like I said, I want to allow some time for questions here. So I'm going to kind of summarize some things that I want to make sure that you remember. Make sure that you double check before you invest. There is a checklist in the notebook on page 10 that you can use. You can make copies. There's also a copy on the Iowa Fraud Fighter website that you may use, and you can use that anytime you're doing business with a new insurance or investment agent or company, not just agent, but company as well. So make sure you look at that form and fill that out when you're in need of a new professional. Again, it's important that you report fraud so that we're aware of it and that we can prevent future victimization on our consumers. So make sure, share this information with your friends and family, book clubs, church groups, things like that. Let them know about this information, about the website, about the workbook that's on the website. Share that information. Word of mouth is the way that we stop these scammers from victimizing our Iowans. And then some other things I want to make sure that you remember. You can report, I'm going to put Yep, how to report fraud. If it's investment or insurance scams, it's the Iowa Insurance Division, and that's our office. The Iowa Attorney General's office looks into scams such as identity theft, tech scams, or counterfeit checks. They may also look into those grandparent scams, sweetheart scams, things like that. They might also refer you back to local law enforcement. It just depends. Iowa Department of Aging looks at elder abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And then our SHIP, our Senior Health Insurance Information Program, and the Senior Medicare Patrol, you can contact them regarding any fraud related to Medicare, Part D, and other supplemental plans. And there's information, these phone numbers on that Iowa Fraud Fighter website. There's also a quiz in the workbook. Once you download that, look at it, test yourself to see how you do on the quiz. So now you are an official Iowa Fraud Fighter. And like I said, please share the knowledge with everyone you know, so that we can empower Iowans to prevent them from becoming the victim of a fraud. So do we have any questions, Erin?
We had one question from earlier. Let me just see. Lynn said that my heart breaks for the teacher, the first one. Did the authorities manage to punish any of those who scammed her?
Yes, they did. And actually, I had the opportunity to work on that case when I was at the Attorney General's office. So I didn't work on it while I was here, but we worked on it. I worked on it on the other side of things. I mainly investigated sex offenders while I was at the Attorney General's office, but sometimes when these investment cases would come up, I was the only one who really had an interest in them. There's a lot of paper involved. And so I had the opportunity to work on it. And yes, they did get sent to prison. Unfortunately, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of times when these people get sent to prison, they're not there very long. They're only there for a couple years, if that. The sentencing is usually not very strict, unfortunately. We need to take better care of our elderly, and when they're victimized, we need to make sure that there's an enhancement there. And I do think there is a law now that does have an enhancement, but I think that was just passed last year. So this is my information. That is my direct phone number to my desk. If you have any questions, feel free to call me, or if you come across someone that's having a problem with their insurance or investment, it doesn't even have to be scam or fraud related. I actually had my best friend gave out my phone number this week to someone that she knew that was having a problem with their health insurance. We handle all kinds of complaints here at the insurance division that involve insurance. We are getting a lot from Eastern Iowa right now because of the derecho. But anything property, casualty, auto, health, investments, anything at all. Like I said, please feel free to give my phone number or my email address out, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about anything related to insurance or investments or consumer scams as well. And if I don't know the answer, we can get you over to the Attorney General's office and get help there.